right, let's look at example 7 and 8. Example 7 asks you to come up with 3 points on a line or on the equation. And then example 8 asks you to actually graph the equation. Now it helps a lot when you start if you know what it's going to look like, and this you will learn later in this chapter. But when you have a line that says, or an equation that says y equals 4x minus 1, there is nothing squared. This is just going to be an equation of a line. And if we know what it's going to look like, that helps us know if we have the right 3 points. We can plug in anything we want. So I'm just going to start with an XY chart. And I'm going to start with 0 because 0 is easy. If I plug in 0 up here for x, 4 times 0 is 0, and 0 minus 1 is negative 1. So I put negative 1 in my Y chart. If I plug in 1 for x, 1 times 4 is 4, and then 4 minus 1 is 3. So I put 3 in my chart. If I plug in 2 for x, 4 times 2 is 8, and 8 minus 1 is 7. So what I have is the 3 points that they asked for in example 7. So let's graph them. X is 0, y is negative 1, x is 1, y is 3, and x is 2, y is 7. It will be here. And what I end up with, it should be a straight line when I'm done. Now I could have plugged in several other points, anything. You know, it goes to infinity. You can plug in an infinite number and you're still going to come up with dots that are on that line. Now let's look at the second one. This is part B. On part B, it's a square root. Now this one is a little bit trickier. One thing you learn about square roots is they end up being half a U. When you graph them, they end up being half a parabola. Okay, something like that. So we know what our graph should look like, and we need to try some points. The trick for this one is you cannot graph a negative. So when I'm going to graph my points, I'm going to start with the smallest thing possible. If I start with 0, and notice I'm plugging in for y this time, okay? If I start with 0, I get square root of negative 1, which is imaginary, and I can't graph that. But if I start with 1, 1 minus 1 is 0, and square root of 0 is 0. And that one I can graph. Let's try 2. 2 minus 1 is 1, and square root of 1 is 1. So I can graph that. I don't want to try 3, because I don't know what square root of 2 is in my head. I don't want to try 4, because I don't know square root of 3. I'm going to try 5. 5 minus 1 is 4, and square root of 4 is 2. And that just makes those easier to graph. So now, when x is 0, y is 1, x is 1, y is 2, x is 2, y is 5. And I end up with that for a graph, which is half a parabola, or a U. The trick for square roots is knowing where to start. And the easiest way to do that is this. You know that y minus 1 has to be greater than or equal to 0. Add 1 to both sides, and that tells me y has to be greater than or equal to 1. So that's a good hint on why I started with 1. Now let's look at the next one. Part C says x squared minus 4. Y equals x squared minus 4. Now you learn later on that anytime you see an x squared like that, it's going to be a parabola. This parabola is going to be going up and down. So when we pick our points, when I do my XY chart, okay, if I try, let's try some negatives. It helps because I know I'm going to need a U when I'm done. If I do negative 1, negative 1 squared is 1, and 1 minus 4 is negative 3. If I do 0, 0 squared is 0, 0 minus 4 is negative 4. If I do positive 1, 1 squared is 1, and 1 minus 4 is negative 3. Now let's graph these and see if we get a parabola. When x is negative 1, y is negative 3. When x is 0, y is negative 4. When x is 1, y is negative 3. So I do get a parabola. Should look like a U, not a V. And again, you're going to learn more about these later on how to actually graph them, and it makes it a little bit easier when we get to section 6.